I want to thank you, students, for your presence. I know it is a little bit inconveniencing to have you curtail your lunch period for this session, but I am happy that you are able to have something to eat and that you are re-energized and you are putting yourself in the position where you can be part of this discussion that will take place here this afternoon. Today we have gathered here to be part of a discussion around the issue of constitutional reform and constitutional review as dictated by our state, where we embark on plans to make adjustments to the document which governs our state, our constitution. I trust that today's event would be one that many of you will take something away from it, to be better empowered, to be more knowledgeable, to get to know something as to what holds with our constitution and the process of reviewing the constitution of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite-Martinique. As a talking point these days is one where everybody here put Carriacou name on the passport. You hear that as a buzzword around. And it is a means of identifying or for identification purpose where Carriacouans feel that they deserve to be identified with Grenada as part of the state. And of course, Petite-Martinique as well. This session would be hosted by three gentlemen who are here with us from Grenada. And I would now introduce you to them. I see we have other persons in our midst. We thank Mr. Isaac from the ministry and Mr. Gay and GIS. Okay, so we are in the company of some very important people here. So I trust that you'll be aware of it. And during the discussion, you'll be given a chance to make inquiries, ask questions, and be part of the discussion. Right? So it could be interactive at times, but please, whenever you have to ask questions, you do it in the appropriate way so that everybody hears what's happening. And, you know, let's be smart in our questioning styles. This morning we have Mr. Robert Branch from the Legal Counseling Department in the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And he is no stranger to us. He has been with us before. Probably not you, but the last group of students had met with him. The last time they were here with Professor Matt McIntosh, who held a session around a similar something at the conference room. We have Dr. Lawrence Joseph, President of the Senate in Grenada. And for those of you who look at news on television and are informed well, you would have seen and known a lot or heard about Dr. Joseph. And of course, we have Mr. Ruggles what? Ferguson. Oh, you know the name? All right. Mr. Ferguson is no stranger. And maybe when you see the face, you may not identify, but when you hear the voice, you would say, hey, I heard this fellow already. All right, so this gentleman is always, you know, on television. He speaks along the lawyers and so on. And today is the opportunity for you to hear from him directly as well. He's the president of the Grenada Bar Association and the OECS Bar Association. So it's quite distinguished. We have a distinguished panel of people. Let's put our hands together and welcome them, please. And of course, to lead off our discussion, I would introduce and invite Mr. Ferguson to start us off.
Okay, thank you very much. I would take the opportunity to sit. I hope everybody can see me. No? Okay. Well, I'll stand in that case. Okay, we are all in Carriacou to deal with constitutional reform or change of our Constitution. Have you ever seen the Constitution before? Has anyone inside here seen the Constitution before? Apart from seeing it in my hand, because this is the Constitution that I have here. But apart from this, have you seen it before? No. Nobody ever saw the Constitution before. Okay, the majority of you have not seen it. Does anybody inside here know what the Constitution is about? Do you have any idea at all? Has any one of you heard about the concept separation of powers? Has any one of you heard maybe in your social science class or social studies about the three arms of the state? You ever heard the three arms of the state? Okay, can anyone say what the three arms of the state? Which are the three arms of the state? Go ahead, say it. Say it. I know this young lady on the left here knows it. Could you say it? Just say which is one arm. And I suppose everybody else would get the other two. The legislature, right? And what does the legislature do? Anybody? Okay. All right. And this gentleman here is the president of the Senate. The president of the Senate, Dr. Lawrence Joseph. And I'm sure you would have heard about Parliament. Parliament. I'm sure you would have heard about Cabinet. And I'm sure you would have heard about the court. Right? All of these concepts. And you would have heard about fundamental rights and freedoms. You may or may not have heard about that. I'm sure you would have heard and may even repeated the concept, freedom of expression. Have you ever heard that concept, freedom of expression? Free speech? Right. Now, all of these things that I have mentioned are provided for by the Constitution. Is there a students' council in the school? Or you have any clubs? I'm sure some of you belong to clubs. And these clubs have rules and regulations. These clubs have structures that say the executive shall be comprised of these persons: a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, a public relations officer, probably. And you will have rules as to how these persons are elected into office. You will have the functions of these organizations, what these organizations are supposed to be doing. And you would have the duties outlined of all these executive members. So it's all about rules and regulations that we all have to follow, whether as a community organization, as a school, or as a nation. And the Constitution, you can look at it as part of the rules and regulations of our country. So, for example, I'm sure you know about general elections. Right? You know we had elections when? When last we had elections? Right. 19th of February 2013. And what was the purpose of those elections? You see everybody going low. You know you're voting for somebody. But when you vote for that person, what happens to that person? What does that person become after you vote them? They become president? They become a member of parliament. Right? They become a member of parliament. And it's important that you understand the links. Okay? You know about the office of prime minister. Okay? And, well, you would have heard about office of leader of the opposition. Though there is no leader of the opposition in parliament, no. But that is provided for by the Constitution, this same document, very small document. You would have heard about general elections every 5 years. That is provided for by the Constitution. You would have heard about a parliament and the responsibility of parliament, and parliament is the same as this young lady said a while ago as the legislature. And the functions of parliament main function of parliament is to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the country. So only parliament can make laws. But how does someone get into parliament to make laws? And you know, you or your parents, because if you're not yet 18 years, you can't do it. You have to be 18 years and over to vote. But your parents, your grandparents, your bigger siblings, brothers and sisters, those who can vote every 5 years to elect persons to go into parliament, to be members of parliament. And how many members of parliament we have? In all, total. How many? Bright guy. 15 members of parliament. And you know why we have 15 members of parliament? Because we have 15 good constituencies. We have 15 constituencies, and therefore we have 15 members of parliament. But parliament is not only the House of Representatives. Those who have won their seats in elections will become members of the House of Representatives. We have, besides House of Representatives, we have another level, and that's called the Senate. And that is where Dr. Lawrence Joseph, that's where he sits, and that's where he's the president of the Senate. And do you know how many members are there in the Senate? Anybody can guess? There are 15 members in the House of Representatives because we have 15 constituencies, and the population, the people of Grenada, vote every 5 years to determine who should be the 15 representatives in the House of Representatives, or the lower house of parliament. In the Senate, though, how many members we have there? Not 7, not 5, not 3, 1. So Dr. Lawrence Joseph alone in the Senate then. He's a bigger weight than I think he is. Eh? We have 13 members of the Senate. 13. And members of the House of Representatives are elected by the people. How does somebody get into the Senate? They are, you know the word? Not elected. Another word. What? Don't be afraid to say it. Somebody said it. Very bright guy. Find this guy getting all the questions right. They are nominated. And they are nominated by whom? Sorry? The who? Right. Good. But somebody has to advise the Governor General. Right? The appointments are made by the Governor General. But somebody has to advise the Governor General to appoint these 13 persons. Who does it? Anybody? Let's hear somebody in the back. There are 2 persons responsible for making recommendations to the Governor General. One is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister recommends 7, as the Constitution says in his own deliberate judgment. And he recommends another 3 after consultation with certain organizations. In this case, farmers, workers, and the business community. So that's 7 plus 3. 10 recommended by the Prime Minister to the Governor General, and 3 recommended by who? The leader of the opposition. And if there is no leader of the opposition, as we have now, then the Governor General would make the recommendation in his own deliberate judgment. Okay, so we don't have very long, so let me pass it on to my other colleagues here so they can explain, because we have the court system and we have also the executive to explain. So what I've just explained is Parliament. And Parliament, remember, is the body that makes laws for the peace, order, and good government of the country. Okay? So let me pass you on to Dr. Joseph.
Thank you very much, Mr. Principal and other members on the head table, students all. Now, Mr. Ferguson has outlined to you in a general way what makes up Parliament. Any particular question that you would like to ask with respect to that? Anything that you are not clear on? Mr. Ferguson outlined to you what the Constitution is all about, and reference was made to a club. Just as a club has rules which outline how the club should be governed, just so the country of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique has rules to outline how the country should be governed. Clubs say there should be a president, a secretary, a public relations officer. The Constitution of Grenada says there should be a prime minister. Well, of course, before that you have the governor general representing the Queen. The prime minister is cabinet. You have the leader of the opposition and other functionaries of government. The prime minister and his cabinet comprise the executive. Parliament comprises the legislature. The prime minister and his cabinet are responsible for making policies, and the legislature is responsible for making laws. The judiciary now comprises judges, magistrates, and so forth, and they interpret the laws and make decisions with respect to those laws. So these are the three arms of government. You have the executive, comprising the prime minister and his cabinet, and of course the governor general representing the Queen. You have the legislature, and you have the judiciary. And there are other aspects of the Constitution that provide guidance as to how the country should be governed. And this Constitution was presented to Grenada 40 years ago, when Grenada became independent. What was that date again? 7th of February, 1974. So on the 7th of February 1974, when Grenada became independent, Grenada was presented with the present Constitution that we have. That's 40 years ago. So over the years, over the last 20 years or so, attempts were made to review the Constitution to see if there are any weaknesses in the Constitution so that appropriate amendments could be made to the Constitution. About 3 committees in the past have been set up, separate committees, and they made recommendations for amending the Constitution or reforming it. But so far, nothing has been done with respect to amending or reforming the Constitution. Now, when you are reviewing a Constitution, there are three options available to you with respect to what you can do with the Constitution. One, you can leave it as it is. After 40 years, you think that it is quite effective and quite efficient. So you think that there should be no changes at all. So you leave it as it is. Or perhaps you can makes minor amendments to it just to tidy up certain things that you find are not very clear. You make certain amendments. Or you can fundamentally change the whole constitution by saying, okay, well, we no longer want the Queen to be the head of state. We want a president. And if you do that, you'll be making a fundamental change to the constitution. And in that way, you're reforming it. There are other ways of reforming the constitution. Because right now, we have a system of government which is called a monarchical system, where you have a monarchy. The Queen of England is the head of state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. In some other countries, even in the Caribbean here, we do not have the Queen as head of state, even though they are independent. They have a president. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, the Queen is not head of state, but it is the president who is the head of state. And the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is the head of government. In Dominica, you also have a president. It's a republic. The president is the head of state, and the prime minister there is the head of government. And it's a different situation in Guyana, where you have an executive president. In Dominica and Trinidad and Tobago, you have ceremonial presidents. And they do the job that the Governor General in Grenada does. Similar jobs. Just ceremonial occasions, they do certain things. But in Guyana, where you have an executive president, the executive president is responsible for leading the government. He is both head of state and head of government. Similarly, like in the United States of America, where you have an executive president. But what we have in Grenada right now is a monarchical system. And if we intend to move from that system to the republican system where you have presidents, then it will be a complete overhaul of the constitution. We'll be reforming the constitution. So this is one of the reasons why we are going around throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique to find out from people, to consult with people with regards to what they consider should be done with the constitution. Whether we should leave it as it is, whether we should make minor amendments, or whether we should reform it completely. So it is up to the people, really, to make that determination so that the government can act. And the government can amend the constitution by passing certain bills in Parliament, 2/3 majority support in the House of Representatives, a simple majority support in the Senate, and a 2/3 majority support in a referendum. When we speak about a referendum, we are talking about asking the people throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique whether they agree with a particular bill or whether they don't agree. They either say yes or no. And once you have 2/3 majority supporting the bill, then the referendum is approved for all the bills. So this is our task, and that is what we have been doing. That is why we are here with you today. Although you cannot vote, you are the future of the country. You are students here. Just a few years ago, I was a student. Just a few years ago, you will be amazed how time flies. In a few years' time, you will be out of here, and you'll be capable of voting. You'll be capable of running the country. So it is important that you take an interest in how your country is governed. And I'm sure I have cousins here. I have a lot of relatives. Anybody from Leicester? Put up your hand. Anybody from you may be my cousin. Anybody called Joseph here? Surname Joseph? You certainly are my cousins. Because all the Josephs in Leicester are my cousins. All right, so with these few words, I would say to give thought to it and spread the word that we should give full consideration to the Constitution and see how what we can do to make contributions with respect to any changes that you may think about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Joseph. And it's my pleasure to be here in Carriacou and at the Hillsborough Secondary School once again. I should tell you that you have a very fine tradition to uphold in terms of involvement in constitution reform. Because in 2011, when we started the constitution reform process, we had an art competition for all the secondary schools in Grenada. And do you know which school won the first place in that competition? It was your school, the Hillsborough Secondary School. And you know which school won the second place in that competition? It was Hillsborough Secondary School. The first three places in that competition, first, second, and third. So it meant that the students of the school at that time had the capacity to understand the fundamentals of the Constitution, and you were able to express yourself in that regard. And I should tell you that before this year is over, we have several competitions that you will have a chance to participate in once more. We're in the process of finalizing the details of those competitions, and you'll hear more about them. There will be essay competitions and debating competitions. So it is important that those of you who have such interests and would like to participate in those competitions, that you familiarize yourself with this constitution, with this document, and ask questions. You can call the Ministry of Legal Affairs. You can look at our webpage. We have a webpage, GrenadaConstitutionReform.com. And we also have a Facebook page. Well, I know you're not supposed to be on Facebook at your age, so probably you're not on Facebook. That was actually supposed to be a joke. I was trying to be funny. But those of you who are on Facebook, you can look at our Facebook page also and see details of it. So you'll see, for example, we have a committee that is in place to look at constitution reform. And the members of the committee are listed on that webpage. And you'd also find out, you'd realize that Carriacou has always had an important place regarding the development of this constitution and in the reform of this constitution. Because Mr. Ferguson and Dr. Joseph outlined to you that there were 3 reviews essentially of this document before. One in 1985. And it was your representative in Parliament, Herbert Augustus Blaise. Have you heard that name before? And who was he? Who was Herbert Blaise? He was a former Prime Minister of Grenada. So when he became Prime Minister, and in 1985, his government established a review commission to review this constitution. And that review commission gave its report in 1985. And in 2010, it was another Carriacouan who was given a mandate to draft a new constitution based on the prior review commissions. Have you ever heard of, or do you know who that person is? Who did a new draft constitution for Grenada in 2010, 2011? Anyone? His name is Professor McIntosh, Simeon McIntosh. He was from Carriacou, and he did a new draft constitution for Grenada. Now, you have a chance to influence this process. Many of you may not be old enough to vote in a referendum, because as you know, you may not know, this constitution provides the manner and form requirements for changing it. And so everyone who is eligible to vote in a general election, who's 18 and registered, can vote in that election. But even if you're not old enough to vote in that election, you can take the message to your parents, to your older brothers and sisters, to your aunts, to your nephews. You can inform them, for example, that this evening we're having a town hall meeting at the Harveyville Government School, to which they're all invited to come to learn more about this process. So you can take the message home to them, to everyone in the community. But even if this referendum is not held within a year or within 2 years, in time, you will be old enough to vote in a referendum. And so you have to prepare yourselves for that time. Because what we've seen emerging in this process is that there is a recognition that there will be continuing need for constitution reform. So that it's not only now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll be looking at this issue. And I want to make 2 points before I conclude, before we start taking questions from you. And one is the whole issue of why this may be of importance to the people of Carriacou. And you've heard your parents, your grandparents saying that they're not happy with the fact that Carriacou and Petit Martinique, these two islands, are not given the recognition that's due because you're separated from Grenada by water, you're far away. And that although Carriacou and Petit Martinique are part of the state of Grenada, the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique have been articulating for years that the names Carriacou and Petit Martinique should be included in the official name. And that is one of the issues that we're currently addressing in this process of constitution reform. So that for the first time in our history, the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique would have a chance to possibly change that name. The two speakers have also spoken about our system of government and the separation of powers principle. And I'd just like to say a little bit of our judiciary. Because as our judiciary is a hierarchical system of courts. We have the magistrates' court. There's a magistrate court in Carriacou. But there's also a high court. So for example, if someone is arrested and charged for commission of an indictable offense, murder, etc., there's a preliminary inquiry in the magistrate court. But then the matter goes to the high court. And if the decision doesn't go into their favor, they can appeal to the Court of Appeal. And if the decision goes against them, they can appeal to the Privy Council. But the Privy Council is based in London. So think of your own circumstances here in this school, that if you have a disagreement with one of your fellow students, you might have a fight, or someone would have taken your book or something, and you want to resolve that dispute. You may want to fight about it, but I know that students in Carriacou don't fight among themselves. You're good students. But let's imagine there's a fight. Who resolves that fight? Probably it's your teacher. And if it's not properly resolved, you may go to your principal. But think if, to resolve this issue, you had to go to Grenada. You had to take the boat to go to Grenada. Or you have to go to St. Vincent or to London to resolve that issue. It becomes very inconvenient for you. So think of it that way. So that this court that's based in London is very far away. It is very expensive for people to go to that court. And that's why only few cases go to that final court in London. So there's established now the Caribbean Court of Justice that's based in Trinidad, that is more accessible, that's more affordable for the people of Grenada, and by extension the people of Carriacou. And so one of the proposals in constitution reform is that Grenada should accede to that court so that that court becomes our final court, rather than the court in London, which is very far away and very far removed, very expensive. So you should tell that to your parents, that that's one of the issues that we want to consider in this reform process. So I thank you for listening to us. I'm sure that you have many questions in terms of what we've been saying to you. And with your principal's permission, I now invite any questions that you may have on the issues that we've spoken about. Thank you.
So you have heard it, and you can know this gentleman. Is your hand up to ask a question? Okay, you can come forward and ask your questions. Okay? To learn more about the Constitution and how it operates, how it would affect you in a direct way. So you understand from this entire exercise that we have had a constitution for 40 years. 40 years. And why do I say 40 years? We have had a constitution. Because we got the constitution when? Say it loudly. When we got independence in February 1970. So we have the experience. We have the experience of living, of course, not you directly, but your parents, grandparents, other family members, living over a period of 40 years and no changes being made to the document. So like with anything else, you want the rules and regulations to work better for you, to be more effective for you, so that you can have, as the Constitution wants, proper checks and balances in place, so that people don't abuse their authority. And that is why constitutional reform, or looking at the Constitution, reviewing it, and taking a decision on it, is being done now after 40 years. And you know, one of the things we have experienced over the period, the 40-year period, twice in our history, we have had elections that went 15-0 in favor of one party. That was in when? 2008? Did it go? 2013, February 2013. 2008 it was 14-11-4. And in 1999 it was 15-0. Okay? In favor of one party. And just 4.5 years later, after going 15-0, 4.5 years later in 2003, anybody know how it went? You have to know your history, you know. In 2003, it was very close. It was what? No, not 14-1. It was close. It was 8-7. 8-7. And in fact, it is the seat in Carriacou. It's the seat in Carriacou that determined who would form the government. Why? Because at that time, Mr. Nimrod and Mr. Prime were contesting the seat. And the first count was Mr. Nimrod won by 5 votes. So there was a 7-7 for all the other seats. 7 seats to NNP, 7 seats to NDC. And in Carriacou, the first initial results was Mr. Nimrod won the seat, but by 5 votes. And there was a challenge in court by Mr. Prime in relation to the results. But the important thing here is that in general elections, the people decide. Now, when you have, like in 2003, 8-7, it means that there is an opposition in Parliament. In 2004, when there is, in 2008, sorry, when there is 11-4, it means that there is also an opposition in Parliament with a leader of the opposition. Even though there is 1 seat, 14-1, it means that that one person will become the leader of the opposition. When you have 15-0, what happens? What happens? What he does? He takes over and he becomes what? The opposition? No, where he takes over, and you are right in terms of him taking over at a point. Where he takes over is because, remember we said there are 13 members of the Senate. Remember that. We have a parliament with 28 members. 15 in the House of Representatives, elected, and 13 in the Senate, appointed. And because senators are appointed, you therefore, if you don't have a leader of the opposition, then there's no leader of the opposition to appoint the senators. So that's where the Governor General takes over. But when there is 15-0, it means that there is no opposition in Parliament. Now, is that a healthy thing? To have no opposition in Parliament? Or why is that not healthy? Because you only have one voice. You won't have people scrutinizing, because that's what the opposition does. The opposition is there to highlight the weaknesses of a government. That's what the opposition is there. And by being able to highlight the weaknesses of the government, it keeps the government on its toes. So the government will try not to make any mistakes, because they know if they make mistakes, the opposition would make noise. Right? So it's important that there be an opposition. And for the opposition to be effective, the opposition must be able to point out things. And the opposition must be able to say, I can do better than the government. And the government must be able to say, I can do better than the opposition, keep me there. And the opposition will be saying, no, we could do better, put us there. But in that back and forth and to and fro, that is healthy, because the opposition tries to operate at its best, and the government tries to operate at its best. So one of the things about constitutional reform, we know in the present system that you can have 15-0 in an election. And what you can also have is that you can have a 14-1 or 13-2 in an election, where you have the persons that get 2 seats get more votes on the national scale than the person that gets 13 seats. And tell me, why is that possible? How would that be possible? For one party to have less seats in parliament, but to get more votes nationally. How is that possible? Or that is not possible? Yeah. You know, is that possible? Because you can have like the Carriacou seat. You can have people winning by 5 votes, and 10 votes, and 2 votes, and 1 vote. Right? But in the 2 seats they win by a few hundred votes, or a few thousand votes. So they get more votes on the national level. But the party gets more seats at the level of the constituency. So, constitutional reform is attempting to address that, where you can have a parliament that always has at least 1 opposition member. And the proposal is to have, apart from the system that we have, which we call first past the post, we have a system of proportional representation. You call proportional representation seats, where now you take the national vote, and let's say you have 6 new seats in parliament, proportional representation seats, and one party gets a ratio of 2/3, 20,000 votes, 30,000 votes. The ruling party can get an additional 4 seats. 2/3 of 6 is 4, and the opposition would get 2 seats. Right? On the ratio of so you will always have an opposition. So that is one of the things constitutional reform is attempting to do. And you must say whether you find that healthy or you prefer how the system is now. But you must have a question, a hard question to ask Mr. Dr. Joseph. They like very hard questions. Good, I know you have a question all the time. I know that.
Yes, my question. Why is it necessary to reform the Constitution over time?
I would say it is necessary to review the Constitution rather than reform. It is necessary to review the Constitution after a number of years, because in the case of Grenada, Grenada got its Constitution 40 years ago, and over that 40-year period, certain weaknesses in the Constitution has been discovered. For example, it is felt by many that the post of supervisor of elections should be replaced with an electoral commission. But in order to do that, you have to amend the constitution accordingly. And this is just one of the things that has come up. And inevitably, over a 40-year period, you'll find weaknesses here and there in the constitution. And you may think about making minor amendments, or you may think about reforming it entirely, reforming the whole structure. So it is always good to review the constitution with the intention perhaps of making certain amendments and perhaps reformulating it as far as possible.
Good. This young man, I know he had a question.
What problems can be encountered if Carriacou breaks away from Grenada?
Brian, you want to take that?
I should tell you, every time I think of Carriacou, I think of Carriacou as the Republic of Carriacou. I joke about it because I guess you're speaking about secession and the possibility of moving away from the state. It is something that we definitely would not like to see. I think we understand the quest for the people of Carriacou to continue to be part of the process, to remain engaged in the state of Grenada. In all the discussions we've heard from Carriacou, that has not necessarily been suggested before in terms of breaking away, etc. And I do recall last month I came to Carriacou to have some initial discussions with key community leaders in Carriacou and with the business community in Carriacou. And they said to me, Mr. Branch, we're not interested in breaking away from the state of Grenada. Although there's one of your colleagues, Mr. Clouden, I think, at one time or the other, spoke about it, but we're not interested in that. So I'm saying to you that it's not something that you should think of, that we encourage. We want Carriacou to remain engaged in the process and engaged in the state so that we remain united. And that's my simple answer to you, that the question of breaking away isn't considered seriously.
You see, if Carriacou breaks away, you ask about the consequences. It means now that Carriacou would then have to run its own affairs, either alone or together with Petit Martinique. And that is something that you have to plan for over a period of time. You can't just do it overnight, because you have to make sure that you are able to sustain yourself as best as possible. But we have always been a unit. And as you know, there's a saying, unity is strength. What we have to be able to do is to utilize the resources collectively of Petit Martinique, of Carriacou, and of Grenada in the best interest of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Breaking away is not an easy thing. It's like you're in your parents' home, your parents providing everything, you're taking things for granted. Next thing, you and your parents fall out, and you say, I'm leaving the house, I'm going on my own. 2 days later, you come back knocking the door, meek and mild, hungry, looking tired, because you realize that you can't make it on your own out there. That is what independence is all about. Just try doing it. As some people with jobs, as I saw a poster recently, somebody had a sticker up that you never really appreciate your job until you lose it. Now you take everything for granted, you're working, you're coming to work. Next thing you lose your job, you can't find one, you have bills to pay. It's a different kettle of fish. Right? So the idea, in fact, not just in terms of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, but the principle these days is not breaking away, but coming together, not just as Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, but coming together as the OECS, coming together as CARICOM, because in these times, it's not about individual countries. You hear about the global village and globalization. We have to compete with the best in the world. And to be effective, we have to do it together, not alone.
There's a name, Carriacou, on the passport. What is the process you should take so that it can change? The passport name can change to Carriacou.
Right. Just let me ask you here. How many people inside here want Carriacou name on the passport? All who want it, stand up. So let's see if we can get it. Everybody who wants Carriacou name on the passport. Okay. All right. So this is a mini referendum. All right, you can sit now. All right, Dr. Joseph will answer that question.
You see, it boils down to looking at the Constitution and seeing what changes we can make. Because in order to get the name Carriacou and Petit Martinique on the passport, it seems to me that the Constitution would have to be amended. And in order to amend the Constitution, we have consultations like what we are having now. You, the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, must make recommendations to the committee so that the committee can take up your cause. The recommendation is presented to government. The government takes it to Parliament once the cabinet approves. And it has to pass, a bill has to pass authorizing that the name of Carriacou and Petit Martinique be put in the Constitution as a name for the state and on the passport. You have to get 2/3 majority support in the House of Representatives, a simple majority support in the House, in the Senate, and 2/3 majority support in the referendum throughout the whole state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. So it is up to you, really, to try to influence your brothers and sisters, your parents, and even people in Grenada to support you in your cause. Because even if all people in Carriacou and Petit Martinique say that they want the name of Carriacou and Petit Martinique to be on the passport, and generally the people of Grenada do not support you, the name will not be changed. So it is important that everybody put in their weight to have the name changed, if that is your wish. So that is the process, and you have a job to do if you really want that to be done.
Okay. Good. Yes, go ahead. Come.
Well, sir, there is a buzz that part of Carriacou is in the St. Vincent Sea. So I was wondering, if you're born in that part, are you a St. Vincent person or Grenadian? And if so, would it have conflict between St. Vincent wanting you if you're a doctor or Grenada want your experience?
Right. Well, that's a very good question. But we all know that in the whole of Carriacou belongs to Grenada. Well, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, the state of Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique. But, well, there is a claim, but I don't think St. Vincent is pursuing the claim in any serious way. But I'm glad you raised that point, because that brings us to the CCJ, which is something that we have not addressed. Have you heard about the CCJ? What does it stand for? Right. Very good. And the Caribbean Court of Justice. You ever heard about the Privy Council? Where is you ever heard about the Privy Council? No, some people have not heard about the Privy Council. But right now, Mr. Branch was explaining that there is a system, a structure in the court system. You have the Magistrates Court, you have the High Court, you have the Court of Appeal, and then you have the Privy Council. If you're not satisfied with a decision that the Magistrates Court makes or the High Court makes, you go to the Court of Appeal. And that Court of Appeal is based in St. Lucia, and it comes to Grenada and the different OECS countries every quarter on average. And if you're not satisfied with a decision of the Court of Appeal, you can go to the Privy Council, which is the final Court of Appeal. The High Court is 1 judge, the Court of Appeal 3 judges, the Privy Council 5 judges, final Court of Appeal. Now, so you can only get to the Court of Appeal or the Privy Council after you go through the High Court and the Court of Appeal, our own local Court of Appeal. So that's why there is a part of the CCJ is what you call the appellate jurisdiction. That means where the CCJ sits as a final Court of Appeal. You must go High Court, Court of Appeal first. Now, there is another portion of the CCJ which we are already part of, and that part is called the original jurisdiction of the court. And that original jurisdiction deals with disputes between countries. It can deal with this. So if, for example, Barbados and Grenada, they have some fishing dispute, or St. Vincent and Grenada have some dispute, or Trinidad and Grenada, where do you go? You go to the CCJ and resolve it. In other words, you don't gather all the troops from Grenada and send Mr. Branch at the front line in Windward to charge the troops from St. Vincent and start firing. Right? Because we don't want to be fighting any war with St. Vincent. It's peace and love, unity. So, when there is that dispute, all now we say Carriacou and Petit Martinique belongs wholly to the state of Grenada, which includes Carriacou and Petit Martinique. I have to be careful what I'm saying when I'm saying this. Right? But if, however, St. Vincent has some claim, then I would think the proper forum to go, instead of us fighting, and boats from St. Vincent coming and surround Grenada, and we go and get big stone and cutlass and knife to face the Vincentians, then we go to the CCJ. That would be my view.
What determines whether or not we have 15 constituencies or more in Grenada?
What determines whether we have 15 constituencies or more in Grenada? That's the question. What determines whether we have 15 constituencies or more in Grenada? Very good question.
Okay. Besides the Constitution, there are laws that support how elections should be run in Grenada. And there is a Representation of the People Act, which is a law in Grenada. And that act says that there should be an Electoral Boundaries Commission, which establishes how many constituencies Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique should have. At the moment, the number of constituencies that have been established, the number is 15. But it is quite possible that sometime in the future, the Electoral Boundaries Commission may say, okay, let us split St. David's constituency, or let us split another constituency, and we form 2 more. So it could be 17. So it really depends on the Electoral Boundaries Commission. It can change at any time. But at the moment, and since we had independence, it was 15.
Yes. What is the role of the President of the Senate and how it is different from the role of the Speaker of the House?
Very good question. Probably Mr. Branch should answer that. But we have the President here.
Okay, both the Speaker and the President of the Senate, they are called presiding officers of both houses of Parliament. The Speaker is the presiding officer of the House of Representatives, and he is responsible for maintaining order in the House, for controlling debates, and for organizing all the order paper and so forth in the House of Representatives. The Speaker, on the other hand, is presiding officer of the Senate, and he has similar responsibilities as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to preside over the meetings of the Senate and to be in charge of the Senate generally. So these are just the distinguishing features of the post of Speaker of the House and President of the Senate. And in terms of protocol, the President of the Senate is usually regarded as higher in protocol to the Speaker. So when you're speaking, when somebody is introducing both the Speaker and the President, they usually refer to the President of the Senate first, before referring to the Speaker.
In other words, the President of the Senate sits, you heard about the Governor General? The President of the Senate, in order, sits close to the office of the Governor General. Not so, Mr. President? That's correct. The Speaker sits in the House of Representatives. Members are there in the House of Representatives. Remember we said? Did we say 28? We said 28, that's the total of Parliament. But there are two houses of Parliament. The House of Representatives where the Speaker sits, and that's how many? Somebody said it, say it loud. Right. And the Senate where the President sits would be? Right. So 13 plus 15 is? Right.
What is the difference between a referendum and a general election?
Very good question. Very, very good.
The general election is a process by which you choose a government. So in a general election in Grenada, you have different political parties who would campaign, and whichever party secures 8 seats, or if you have amalgamation of parties, whoever has 8 seats, and essentially the Governor General, whoever in his opinion has the support of the majority of the House of Representatives from the government. So, and the Representation of the People Act, as was explained to you, outlines the details of the general election. Now, the referendum is a process by which the Constitution, or this Constitution, can be changed. So the Constitution provides that to amend or to change the Constitution, you must first have the support of 2/3 of the members of the House of Representatives, and then 2/3 of the support of the Senate. And after that, the issue has to be put to a referendum, so that every person who is eligible to vote in a general election is eligible to vote in the referendum. So that's a similarity in that sense. So to change this Constitution, and if the issue, for example, as to whether the name Carriacou and P.T. Matic should be included in the official name of the state of Grenada, that will have to go to a referendum. So it's a vote on that issue. And everyone who's eligible to vote in a general election will also be eligible to vote in the referendum.
Can a senator be fired from the House of Senate, and why?
Very good question. Can a senator be fired from the House of Senate, and why?
Now, there are different ways in which senators can be fired, as you say. Now, there are 13 members of the Senate. All are appointed by the Governor General on the advice of different people. 7 on the advice of the Prime Minister in his own capacity as Prime Minister. 3 are appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister has to consult 3 groups. Presently, the 3 groups are trade unions, farming community, agriculture. The third is the Chamber of Commerce, as a business community. Normally, these people would put up their nominees, and the Prime Minister would recommend those nominees to the Governor General. The other 3 members of the Senate usually are nominated by the leader of the opposition, and the Governor General appoints them as opposition senators. But presently, as there is no leader of the opposition, the Governor General, in his own personal capacity, appointed 3 senators as opposition senators. Now, in order to fire, as you say, any of these senators, those senators who were nominated by the Prime Minister could ask the Governor General to withdraw that nomination. Those appointed or nominated by the leader of the opposition could ask the Governor General to withdraw that nomination, and they would no longer be senators. Those appointed by the interest groups, agriculture, trade unions, and the business community, they can ask the Prime Minister to advise the Governor General to withdraw their nominations. So that is how senators can be relieved of their duties as senators.
You just needed to warm up, man.
What is the maximum of time a senator can be suspended?
President of the Senate.
There is no minimum or maximum time that a senator can be suspended. It just has to be a reasonable time, dependent on the circumstances of the case. He can be suspended for 2 sittings of the Senate or 3 sittings, but there is no. I don't think the President of the Senate would be unreasonable in that capacity.
And just one thing I wanted to add to a question that was asked before, whether the senator can be fired and the reason why. And no reason has to be given for removing a senator. So if a senator is removed, there is no reason that has to be offered for the removal of that senator. Just the senator is here today and is not there tomorrow. Question?
Is it possible to have a magistrate in Carriacou? And if so, why is it not done yet?
Why is it not
done yet?
magistrate? Okay. You see, this gentleman don't get in trouble. So, and that is good. It means that he does not have to visit the magistrate's court in Carriacou on charges that have been brought against him. But there is a magistrate's court in Carriacou. It's right on the upstairs the police station. There's a magistrate's court there, and the magistrate's court sits. Sorry? There is a magistrate. But with Carriacou, based on the laws, the same magistrate who sits in Carriacou sits two other places, in Guelph and in Victoria. So the magistrate comes to Carriacou, and that's part of the law, on the third week every month. So once a month, the third week of every month for 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, usually. So the next time the magistrate is due to visit Carriacou is on Monday the 19th of May, and he will be sitting until Wednesday, the 22nd of May. And there's a magistrate's court in every parish, and a magistrate presides. There is no magistrate's court in Petit Martinique. Of course, Carriacou and Petit Martinique considered as one big parish. But there's no separate magistrate's court in Petit Martinique. So when the magistrate comes up, the people of Petit Martinique who have matters before the court have to travel across. In fact, that was one issue raised recently, whether or not there should be a separate magistrate court in Petit Martinique. Questions?
Why is it necessary to change Prime Minister every 4 or every 5 years?
Well, in our system of government, there's a process of general election where every 5 years, the people of Grenada get to choose the leaders or who leads them in the government. And so the possibility exists that a prime minister can be changed. A system of checks and balances, and it's part of our democracy. And that's a simple answer to it. It's a question of our democracy. And it allows the people of Grenada to, if there's a sitting prime minister and there's a general election, and if the prime minister and his government, his or her government, the people perceive that they're doing a good job, an adequate job, they can get re-elected. And if for whatever reason they choose another party, then that party leads the country. And after a general election is held, the Governor General, in his own deliberate judgment, decides on who he perceives will have the majority of the support in the House of Representatives. And that person is appointed Prime Minister. So that's a system of government that we have at present.
Yes.
What would be the cost be like if the name Carriacou and Petit Martinique should be included on the passport?
The cost?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. Again, very interesting. It shows that you're thinking. Because if there's a name change, just imagine you are part of a football club and the name changes from Hillsborough United to Hillsborough Strikers. Alright? What it means, because you have a new name, you would first of all have to reflect it on all your official documents. So the documents will have to change. In fact, we were discussing among ourselves, for example, if the passport has to change to include Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and let's say the proposal carries through, what then happens? Whether new passports will be issued now, which would mean the printing of several new passports. I don't know what profit the state makes in terms of passports. But, or whether you wait until the present passport expires and then you issue the new ones with the new names. But certainly, all the official stationery will have to change. Everything that bears the name now Grenada, and remember, it is really the state of Grenada. Grenada is just one island of 3 islands. So it's Grenada Island, Carriacou Island, Petit Martinique Island. But the state of Grenada, which is what it's referred to, the state of Grenada includes Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Just as you might say Trinidad. I go in Trinidad or go in Tobago. But the name of the place is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The name of Guyana, you might say Guyana. But the name of Guyana is the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. We might say we go into Dominica. But the real name of Dominica is the Commonwealth of Dominica. And I've seen proposals made for Grenada. You have one proposed name, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Then there's another proposed name, in fact, on one of the drafts, which is the Commonwealth of Grenada. There's another proposed name, the Republic of Grenada. And there's even one that came out last night in one of the consultations, Grenada and the Southern Grenadines. There is that proposal also. Right? But one point I was making recently is that in St. Kitts, for example, I remember in a meeting in St. Kitts, sometime recently, I referred to St. Kitts, the person from St. Kitts, and I was immediately corrected, and I was told Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Right? So everybody really want to see the name included in the official documentation.
If one of them senators dies, what would happen? Who nominates the replacement, and what procedures should be taken before he is appointed?
For whom? For the senator?
Or a senator, or one of the senators.
Yeah, okay. Let me see. Yeah, okay, just read it over. Just read it over.
If one of them, like a senator or thing, dies, what would happen? Who nominates the replacement, and what procedures should be taken before he's appointed?
Oh, before he's appointed. Okay. In other words, what, and it can include, again, very good question. Very, very good question. It shows that you're thinking. But he says, if a member of the House dies, or a member of the Senate dies, what happens? How do you replace that person? What are the procedures? Senator Joseph?
It's 2 different procedures for each of the houses. In the House of Representatives, if a member dies, then you have to have fresh by-elections for the particular constituency in which that person was representative. In the Senate, on the other hand, it depends on who appointed or who nominated the senator. If the senator dies and the Prime Minister had nominated him or her, then the Prime Minister normally would nominate another person or the leader of the opposition, as the case may be, or the interest groups, agriculture, commerce, trade unions, and so forth. They would nominate another person. So that's the procedure, different procedures for both houses of parliament.
Okay, we take the last question from this lady. Okay, young lady. I think she's a potential parliamentarian. She likes to ask questions. That's very good.
So if Grenada decides to break away from, Britain fought for us, right? So if Grenada decides to break away from that, that means the Queen and our money, you have to change?
Well, Mr. Branch is the expert on the Queen.
Well, I'd say the answer is yes or no. I mean, look at Dominica, for example. Dominica is a republic, the Commonwealth of Dominica, and the Queen is not the head of state of Dominica. They have a president, but they use the same EC currency as we do, and the Queen still appears on their currency. So if we have a referendum and we decide that we want to delink from having Her Majesty as our head of state, have our own president, we do not necessarily have to change our currency because it's one OECS currency, so we can continue having the same currency. And that's a very interesting question. That's a very great question because there are many people in Grenada. And when Professor McIntosh and I did consultations even in the diaspora, there are many people who are of the view that if we move towards becoming a republic and having our own president, that somehow that would influence the value of the currency that we have. But that's not necessarily so. That the EC currency will still remain. We'll still have the East Caribbean Central Bank in place and the other arrangements as regards our banking institutions and our financing. We can have our president without having changes to the currency.
Yes, correct.
All right. I was hoping that we would have afforded you more time to ask many more questions. But I think we also have to acknowledge that these gentle people form part of a panel that have more presentations and have to be involved in other forum to be able to explain to other audiences as to what holds with constitution reform and so on. So I think we may want to cut it at this stage. I listened on, very nice questions. It's good that you can participate in these sessions. I trust that every one of you would leave here learning at least something from what was clarified or explained here. Very good food for thought, some good clarification, some good information and some facts. And that every citizen of the state must know as to what holds or what exists in this part. Some of you are perhaps too young to have experienced some of the thing that goes on within or statewide. But as you grow older, you will become part of these processes, right? So it's a good preparation for you to, get yourself ready for a lot of these things, including elections and so on. And it's good to understand what holds so that when the time comes, you would fit in very nicely, playing your part or filling your role as a citizen of the state. With keen interest, I heard Mr. Ferguson mention a number of proposed names from the consultation already for the changes to be made on the passport. And it seemed as though with all the proposed names, if there were 4, I think, outlined, or 3 or 5, but I think if it's 1 or 0, had the name Carriacou in it. So it seems as though despite all the changes, it seemed to be that we're really not going to put his name Carriacou on the thing, because it's the Commonwealth of, or Grenada and, you know, I think what the people of Carriacou might be clamoring for is the word Carriacou and Pitimatnik. So I hope that that will be given some consideration whenever, if this thing comes through, that the word, the name Carriacou, the name Pitimatnik be seen, and not any version of it that would take it away, because as it is now, the state of Grenada include Carriacou, so it is there hidden. So we don't want it to remain hidden. We want it to be revealed. That's what I think could be the central idea in all these things. This was a very good setting, and I appreciate your presence. And I will call on one of the students to give a vote of thanks. Nyasha Lewis, you come forward and give us a vote of thanks. Let's welcome Nyasha.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the principal, staff, and students of the Hillsborough Secondary School, we thank you for coming here today to share what you have shared with us. It was of great interest, and I trust that my fellow students have taken it into consideration and that they learned more about Carriacou, Grenada, and even Pitimatnik.
Okay, well said and well done. Thank you very much, Nyasha. Okay, we have come to the end of the session, but this is what we'll hold. We will allow the persons who are at the head table to take their departure first. And following that, you will go back to your classes until 7th session. All right, so you go back to 7th session after the head table has dismissed. So thank you very much again for your time.